Prynu da, good afternoon everybody. We're now live. Just let everybody settle down. Okay, can we have apologies for absence, please?
Got apologies from Councillor Howells.
Thanks very much. Okay, the first order of business. Can I have declarations of interest, please? Okay. First order of business is the appointment of chairperson. Can I have nominations, please?
Nominate Gareth Chapman.
Thanks very much. Could I have a seconder? Thanks very much. Could I have a vote, please? All in favour? I believe that's unanimous. Gareth, I welcome you to the chair.
Thank you very much. Just say thank you to the committee for putting up with me for another year at the end of this now electoral term, so final year. Next item on the agenda is the appointment of a vice chair. Nominations, please. Don, seconded. Okay. No other nominations. All in favour? Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the minutes of the last meeting, pages 3 to 12 for correctness only. Someone prepared to move, please? Thank you. Can I have a seconder? Thank you. All in favour, please show. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the purchasing card transaction audit review 24-25, pages 13 to 18. Oh.
Sorry, Chair. Actions arising.
Ooh. Which page, Norma? Yep.
Agenda item 5 of the 22nd of January meeting and items 1 and 2. I just thought it was unacceptable really to have deadlines simply stated as 2027. We need to be more specific than that.
Okay.
And 2027 is a long time away.
Yeah.
Chair, can I be a bit more helpful with that? If there's recommendations relating to the training, this is because it'll be after the post-election period, so I think we're trying to get a closer date. Once we've got a bit more substantial date, then we can get back to you. It should be items, yeah, from page 9 and 10. So we've just gone with 27 for now, because realistically they'll be happening after the May 2027 election. That's when the process should be more clear.
Well, I'm just looking at the action that we recommended the training be classified as essential training for elected members. And then it says, in progress, a review of member training is currently being conducted. So and the committee's recommendation be considered. So are we saying this is all going to be on hold till after the next election? Is that what we're saying?
Thanks, Chair. So if we're looking at the induction training for elected members, we're only literally just starting to look at that package now. So we're looking back at recommendations of this committee and other committees, feedback that we've had from our elected members and some guidance from the WLGA to come up with a new package of induction training that would go through our internal processes, be in place ready for May 2027 next year. So I can't give you a date, but it would certainly be completed by then.
You're away. There we go.
Can I, just to confirm what you're saying, then, if it's going to be ready for the induction of the next new intake, it would probably be agreed well before then.
Yes, certainly. So we start the planning process now. There's lots of information to be assimilated as part of that planning process. We'll come up with the full programme ahead of May 2027, but that's when we'll start to roll it out.
Okay, so this could come back to committee later in the year?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Okay,
we're starting working on it now. Yeah.
Okay, so we could put this on the table it for the October meeting or something like that?
Yeah, we can certainly come and give an update on where we are with that.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, exactly. You know, that we need to have a month, even if we know the election. You know, we know something's going to be done the month after.
Taylor, can you put it on the forward work programme for the October meeting? Update on...
It'd be for the November meeting.
Yes, is that okay?
Yeah. And I'll update the tracking table as well. Just I'll put it as the date to October, and so it just shows that the recommendation is kind of right into that.
Anything else, Norma? No. Okay. Item 6 then is the limited assurance. Who's taking this? Myron?
Chair, I can start off. Colleagues can come in as wishes. So this is a report coming to you because this audit was completed and reported on the cusp, I think, between the old way of doing things and now the new way of doing things, which is what we're moving to, which is the online system that we've just been looking at. So for transparency, we've included the report here. It relates to a second audit and a second limited assurance on the use of purchasing cards across the council. We did instigate a robust number of actions after the first one, but the same issues were prevalent when the second audit was completed as well. And the report now highlights to you the action plan that we've now got following this second audit. Just to let the committee know as well, as part of the action, there will now be a move towards a more sort of continuous audit in this area. So rather than an annual audit of transactions on these cards, we will be moving to a more of a sort of smaller but more continuous audits in going forward. And a lot of the actions have already been implemented, like the communications to reminding managers and senior managers of the importance of carrying out the controls that this audit highlighted. So it is for information, just because we were on that cusp, so we want to be transparent about that.
Thank you. Marion, any questions? Norma?
So I've got a number of points to make, Chair, if I may. I felt very concerned reading this report, you know, where we talk of weak governance, risk management in internal controls, breach of the policy, serious misuse of cards, and for me, it's indicative of lack of managerial oversight, training and control. And we've got one fraudulent case. We don't know what the outcome of that is. It's just mentioned. And I didn't feel that the paper certainly didn't give me the necessary assurance that things were being tackled. And I wondered whether this committee should actually see an action plan and progress on that action plan. Because for me, what comes through is lack of managerial oversight more than anything. And, you know, when I saw serious misuse of cards, I thought, well, how has this been allowed to happen? And, you know, breach of policy. And these are fundamental managerial issues. I think I've said enough, yeah.
Did you... Myron, do you want to come back on that?
Yeah, the audit has been taken very, very seriously. It's gone to the executive board. It's gone to the corporate management team. The Chief Executive has again reiterated the importance that the controls that are in place are actually adhered to by managers throughout the organisation. We've written to every manager. So I take your point that it is, you know, the result was disappointing again after the first audit. Absolutely. You mentioned that fraud case. What I would say to you is all internal HR processes have now been completed with that case, and the individual has been dismissed. It has also been reported to the police. We mustn't talk any further about that one, but the point is it has been reported to the police, and that is following its course of action.
Yeah, thanks, Mario. I think for Norma, obviously all the actions which have been taken resulting from the 2025 audit are set out on page 15, and I'm sure Norma's fully aware of that. So exactly what you've said, each of the action points there have been set out there, and as you say, reinforce the policy, that's complete. Disciplinary action, that's complete, but it's ongoing because obviously these issues will need to be looked at, as you said, on a rolling programme now. And the only issue I had in regards to, before Councillor Reynolds comes in, is that the only outstanding matter in reality, apart from those matters which are ongoing, is this undertake another full review of the card holders. Because again, if that hasn't taken place yet to date, it says this review is currently underway. That's the only outstanding matter, and that's the only outstanding matter in reality we need to have back to us, because again, you've got the issue again, review of solutions for purchases currently made via a P-card for residential homes and specialist needs. You've then got the future further notes, and again, there's point 3 is that there's an ongoing rolling audit again of the purchasing card. So whilst I understand what Norma's saying, subject to what committee says, most of those issues have all been addressed now. It was concerning that, we dealt with, this is one of the first items I think we dealt with in 22-23 when this came before us, and we were given the assurances then that the matter had been dealt with, and lo and behold it comes back in 24-25. But I think from what is set out obviously in the report, all those issues have been addressed again. I don't think we had disciplinary action last time, but we've had it this time. And it has been referred to the police clearly, but those couple of points that just need to be reiterated when we move forward.
Yes, and we have now completed the review of the cards that are out there and are they actually needed, and I believe that there will be a report going to the Exec Board in the next month or so, and I think there's quite a few cards that are coming out of distribution through that process. We can probably do some more, but we are making, that action is also nearing completion as well.
Bruce? Councillor Reynolds?
Thank you, Chair. To be honest, my comments were following on from what Norma was saying. I suspect that a lot of what Myrian has just said will cover my comments anyway. But I was equally disappointed with the fact that the non-compliance with the P-card policy was still so prevalent, according to the report. In particular, on page 14, it mentioned that there was over £50,000 of unsupported expenditure. Now, I understand that obviously within the grand scheme of council finances, that's relatively small, but in terms of reputational damage and the public perception, £50,000 of unsupported expenditure is not good. But I understand what you just said, Myrian, about the fact that a lot of these things are being addressed now. I think it's important that they're not only addressed, but they seem to be addressed in terms of the reputational damage to the council, the possible reputational damage. The one thing that surprised me as well, with the level of non-compliance that seemed to be in the report, was that there was only one disciplinary action taken. I mean, obviously, I understand confidentiality, and we can't discuss these things and individual cases here, but I was quite surprised that there was only one instance that went as far as a disciplinary. I just don't know whether you've got any particular comment on that. Thank you, Chair.
I'll deal with that as part of my comment. So, to date, there's been one disciplinary case. There's nothing really else to say about that. There's a far more robust approach being taken on this than prior to the previous previous audit. So I suppose just a couple of bits from me. It totally recognise the seriousness of this, that it's been taken very seriously. We put in place a series of actions after the first audit, which we had hoped and should have resolved most of the issues. The report does recognise there's been some improvements in this, so I think we need to take that. Some of the issues that have been raised by it from the audit, I think it references in it, for instance, being used for professional fees. We've uncovered, unpicked some of that, and that is in line with the policy. It transpires, so those things are resolved. There's some things in there that we need to do some further checking around, particularly around parking fines, etc. The reason we use P-cards to pay for those is because we need to pay for them at the point of receipt, so that's cheaper. That reduces the financial burden on the organisation. However, there needs to be a mechanism, and part of the work that Amy's going to be doing with the team is ensuring that mechanism's in place. That money is then reclaimed from that individual. These will be leased vehicles, etc. that relates to. I suppose just a couple of other things, again, to give the committee some assurance about the way that we're approaching this. Myself and Kevin, as the HR manager, have had some fairly challenging and robust sit-down conversations with some heads of service around some of this and the details associated with their services and how they're doing this, and those will continue. Richard's team has provided us with lists at the end of the month of those managers who haven't authorised payments, and those conversations happen directly with directors and then with heads of service associated with that as well. So we're basically dealing with this on an individual by individual basis now. All the things we can do organisationally and done, training, awareness raising, messaging, the system works. You know, we're working through that. There are some things, and Richard and Myra and I have talked about this. You know, what we can't do is put some of our staff, and I think this has been some of the case, in a situation where they can either follow this policy and fail to fulfil their statutory responsibilities or meet their statutory responsibilities. That's particularly around housing. So when we've got emergency temporary accommodation, and we're working specifically with that service area around how we resolve that. That shouldn't be the case. They should all have cards that they use themselves, but that seems to be some of the issues around the sharing of data. Well, utilisation of other people's cards in order to make those hotel purchases. But there's some further investigation around that. Norma's comment then about an action plan. Yeah, I've got zero issue if the committee wishes to have an action plan on this. It is a real high priority for us.
Yeah, just to come back, thanks for that, Rhys. You've assured us that some stuff is going on. But I think as a committee, as this committee, I think when I was looking for assurance reading these papers, I read actions resulting from the 2025 audit, and they listed, and I thought, well, okay, well, have they been done? Who's doing them, and by when? Because we need assurance as a committee that this does not happen again, because it is quite a serious reputational issue, along with a number of other sort of concerning points. So I'll leave it at that.
Amy?
Yeah, I just wanted to confirm that the actions that are in the report that Myrian is referred to are the actions out of the audit, so they're also subject to my action tracking processes as well. Rhys and I have met lately on P-cards. I'm actually following up them myself, and they're not going to be closed until I've seen, for example, the payment plan set up with the individual to return the money for the parking fine, for example. So and those actions are action tracking. So I'm just maybe slightly concerned we could be duplicating effort, because those actions that are in there are in response to the work that's being done.
Right, I think there's a lesson to be learned here, isn't it? We have a paper before us that doesn't tell us that. So when I read this paper, I'm looking for assurance, and it's not there. But you're giving me the assurance, so the paper should have given us that assurance. So can I just suggest that in future?
We've had a series of debates around this. I think as we are now transitioning to the new way of working with this, what you will have is the audit report with the actions, with the officers in the room, to have that conversation all in the one go. This is a bit of a legacy issue, right, with the old system. Right, totally get the point, but in the future it will be resolved with the way we're going to do.
Don.
Thank you. Just on page 14 of the report, where we're talking in terms of the 50,000, which it found, and it said, in sampling reviewed. I'm just wondering clarification as to how big was the sample? Was the sample 1% and you found 50,000, or was the sample...
Amy?
That's our sampling testing. I cannot give you that answer today, Don, but I can come back to you and tell you exactly what that sort of the context of that sampling was. But also just to reiterate, that's why we're going to move away from sampling, and this continuous audit assurance will be 100% of transactions on a quarterly basis, so that we're not waiting a year to say, oh, hang on a minute, you're not following this policy. It's quarterly, feeding into Rees and tackling them as they arise rather than waiting the year. So, yeah, where we can get the data is going to be 100% of transactions.
Okay. Thank you. The other, just from an assurance point of view, I'd love to know the numbers, but I'm not going to ask. Have we had cards that have been suspended? Have we had cards that have been reinstated? Have we had cancelled cards? And has the number of cards been reduced? And
yeah, thanks.
Is that significant, or is it moderate, or is it just one?
Okay, so my e-procurement team leader undertakes a monthly review of compliance. So we check that cardholders have reviewed their transactions, uploaded valid receipts, and then we check that supervisors have authorised, they've reviewed those transactions and authorised them. Where that doesn't happen on a monthly basis, we chase those officers. If it still hasn't happened, those cards then get suspended. So we're suspending cards potentially every month. In order for a cardholder then to have their card reinstated, they have to wait a minimum of 3 months. That's what the policy says. And they have to undertake the training before their card is reinstated. So we've got those mechanisms in place in the policy, and that's what happens every month.
Okay, I'm a very nasty person. You didn't actually answer my question. You told me what the policy and what you're going to do. I asked in terms of have cards. You told me how they can get suspended. I want to know, have cards been suspended?
Yes, they have.
Cards, right.
Yes, cards have been suspended.
And I'm asking, has the total number been reduced? And are we talking about something that is a insignificant number or a significant number?
It's not a significant number. We only cancel, if we cancel cards on a monthly basis, it might be 1 or 2 cards at the most. But part of the review that we've undertaken as well, so the review on all of the cardholders, that's now been completed. We've seen a reduction across lots of service areas on the number of cards they want. Those reports are currently with the strategic directors for sign-off, but we will have seen an overall reduction in the number of cards. And what has also been mentioned today as well is we're working with certain service areas to see whether we can reduce their reliance on purchase cards as well, particularly in housing and children's services. We might be able to put other procurement mechanisms in place that negate the need to use the purchasing cards. So we're doing all of that work as well at the same time.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ray?
Right. Yeah, my question was about the impact of somebody having their card suspended, but you've just said that alternative arrangements can be made. So if somebody loses their card, it's taken off them, they have to reapply, and it takes, what did you say, 3 months or so? What is the actual impact to that card holder no longer holding a card?
Well, the impact is essentially that officer cannot make card purchases. So they either have to revert to raising a purchase order, or maybe another officer within the team who's also got a purchase card has to make that purchase. But without the physical card, that officer is unable to, make purchases with that card during that period of 3 months. So it does cause issues for the service area. That's what we've been addressing with the heads of service as well. So, for example, the example given with housing, that's making sure the right officers have got the right cards with the right transaction limits to make sure that they can operate effectively. But if one of those officers then doesn't comply with the policy, fails to review, etc., that card will be suspended in line with the policy. So it causes issues in that service area.
It's sort of difficult to understand how the problem can arise if robust processes are followed. So if the person that spends every month, I presume the card is paid like a traditional card, and the supervisor signs that off, there seems to be enough checks and balances in there that it sort of can barely go wrong, So what would you say to that?
I totally agree. The policy and the checks and balances we have in place are robust. Every cardholder and every supervisor knows what they have to do every month. The deadlines are there. They haven't changed for many, many years. So it really is down to cardholders and supervisors doing what they should be doing in line with the policy. If they don't do that, then they're not complying with the policy and what they know they should be doing.
And obviously the cardholder would have an impact. What about the supervisor? I mean, the supervisor is sort of complicit in some sort of way to the failure. So does the supervisor have any penalties, if you like?
Yes, so supervisor cards get suspended as well for 3 months. So if the cardholder then needs to carry on using their card, they have to find another supervisor within the service area, and we transfer that over in the system. But essentially as well, what's also been mentioned is every month we report these non-compliances now up to heads of service and strategic directors, so they've got that oversight on a monthly basis of any officer within the council that's not done what they should be doing.
So you say non-compliance and retraining. So is there any other disciplinary action for not following the policy? When does skill become will?
So we report every month on cards that we suspend up to the heads of service. So they get an email from my e-procurement team leader advising them of the name of the officer, what they failed to do, and we will remind the head of service that in line with existing policy, they should review what has happened and consider any action, disciplinary action, as a result of what hasn't been done.
You want to pick anything up?
Yeah, I just, without getting into any sort of details on that, we've, if you remember, committee members back, we went through this process where we felt we needed to review the training and we need to review the policy. And Richard's team have done a lot of work on trying to make this to make it as easy as possible. I'd remind the committee these are not things that should be used on a day-to-day basis. They are for those circumstances where in the old days you would have used petty cash to do things. Most of the things we should do should be through purchase orders. And I think Richard's working through that. How many of these transactions could be done in that? So we minimise the amount of usage, and that minimises the risk. There's always going to be risk associated with it, because if you think about it, these are all, where they are used and heavily used, they're in our frontline reactive services that are essentially dealing with emergency situations. So there's always going to be an element of risk. I suppose, to answer your question, because we have had this conversation at our corporate management team with heads of service, ultimately, misuse of the card is a disciplinary matter. It's failure to follow reasonable instructions and also to fulfil the duties of your role. And some of the roles require you to be able to use a purchase card. So ultimately, it is a disciplinary element to this as well. But obviously, we're trying to avoid that as much as possible. We need to bring our staff along with us to do this in the best possible way.
Okay, are there any other questions? Any comments? I think the only comment from me is, obviously, we've had a long discussion about this, and it is one of those audits that have fallen between two stools in reality. There was the internal one and no swap of taking it over. And sort of picking up the points that have been raised, I think, subject to what committee agrees, is that we should have a further report back, say on the September meeting, picking up the points that have been raised, looking at the action plan. Obviously, a lot of them have been signed off, a lot of them have been dealt with, etc. I think picking up some of Don's points that, you know, it may be worthwhile just saying, look, you know, where are we now, May, June, this is what was undertaken, July, what was undertaken, maybe then how it's been escalated within the department, whether it has been considered for any disciplinary action. Because again, I think picking up a point that Rhys has made, you know, there's a consequence to the misuse of these cards, you know, or whether they're not in accordance with policy, and again, they need to be followed through. But I would hope that, you know, given this is the second time this has been looked at, lessons will be learned. But again, in a different place this afternoon, we were discussing, you can put as much information out there, as much training as possible out there, etc., etc. But now and again, the wheel will come off. But again, I think ensuring that there's a robust policy for, you know, some of these staff, I think, are in very difficult positions when they exercise the use of that purchasing card. From what you said, Rhys, they are on the front line. They're there doing a job, and they're sometimes, as long as they can get the cover and ensure it's in agreement with policy, they can get signed off. And even if it isn't in accordance with policy, a justification needs to be made in regards to why they spent that money in that urgent situation. So what I would suggest to committee is that the recommendation be that we note the results of the 25 audit and the rationale and reasons for the audit and opinion, and that we have a further report back in September, you know, given an update on the position, and hopefully committee can be assured that we can sign this off for the future. Someone prepared to move, please? Thank you. Can I have a seconder? Thank you. All in favour? Thank you very much. Next item on the agenda is item 7, which is the Audit Wales annual report on the grants work. Helen, you with us to do this?
Yeah, I'll start off.
Thank you.
Chair. Good evening, everyone. So today I'm just going to quickly run through with you, first of all, our grant certification report for 24-25. So you'll see from the report that we audit 4 claims annually. 2 on behalf of the Welsh Government, so that's the non-domestic rates and the money transfers, 1 which we return to the Teachers' Pension Agency, and 1 which we return to the Department of Work and Pensions, so that's with regards to the housing benefit. So the total of all those claims is 120 million, and our findings are summarised on the table on page 5 of our report. So the money transfers, there were no issues or amendments with that audit. The non-domestic rates, there was an amendment which was reversing the issue we identified last year and reported to you last year. The teachers' pension claim, there were 2 small amendments, quite low in value. And then with regard to the housing benefit, so there was a noticeable improvement this year on the quality of the underlying information which brings together that claim, showing that there has been an improvement in systems and controls over recent years as well. And this is starting to flow through the results of our testing. The issues identified in prior years haven't been recurring. There was a recovery of 11,000 from a landlord from a duplicate property charge. So just to note on that next year, the Department of Work and Pensions are slightly amending how we're required to audit the housing benefit claim, but this should result in slightly less testing, which should then follow through into the fees that we charge for that work, obviously subject to any errors arising and additional testing that may be necessary as a result of those. So it's a very quick run through of the report. I did have a brief conversation with officers and members in a private session just to see how useful they found this report. And going forward, we've decided that we'll probably not bring this report to the Governance and Audit Committee unless there were significant issues on any of the claims that we're required to report to you. So I hope that's in agreement with all the members today. I'm happy to take any questions.
Yeah, thank you, Helen, for that. Any questions, members? Tom?
Helen, when we do the, when we look at the corporate risk register, the thing that's really important to us is the direction of travel. You know, is it positive, is it negative, is it neutral? In reading your report, it looks like the direction of travel the Council's been going on with the lack of errors and everything is a really good direction. Would you agree with that?
Yes, there is definitely fewer errors identified this year, and as said, we follow up as a necessity any issues that we've identified in prior years with additional testing, which we refer to as cake testing, so not the cake you eat, but accumulated audit knowledge and experience testing, and all those samples that we undertook as well were free from error.
So I'm just to follow up with that. If the direction of travel is positive and there's less errors, it's probably going to be having cost reflective, although it would be remiss of me to say thank you for finding nearly the 12 grand. So maybe we should take that off your audit fee so you've got a net sum to start with. So I would imagine that the direction of travel of the fee will go downwards as well.
Yes, so with the new audit approach next year, there'll be less testing, so in theory there will be a lower fee, but if we do identify any errors, that will result in additional testing, which of course will cost you more. So as long as there are no errors, yes, the fee will go down.
That is an excellent answer, Helen.
Any other questions? Any comments? No? Okay, if we have a recommendation then that we note the contents of the report and that the committee won't receive any further reports in future years unless there are significant issues identified. Someone prepared to move, please? Thank you, Ray. Seconded? Thank you. All in favour? Thank you. Item 8 then is the Audit Wales Detailed Audit Plan 26. So this will be a dual action. So Helen, I expect you'll deal with the financials and Bethan will deal with the performance. Okay, thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So I'll kick off. So the Audit Plan 2026 sets out the audit work we will undertake this year for the Council and the Group as well. This year, just to note that we have a new company that we're required to consolidate into the financial statements, Cymru. So that will be in the accounts from January 2026 from the financial audit perspective. With regard to our financial audit, we do audit to a concept of materiality, so just to remind the members of that. So our materiality that's been set for 25-26 is 6.5 million. We do consider lower materialities for areas of the accounts that are of general more interest to the public. So our senior officer remuneration will be audited to the nearest 1,000, and related party transactions that involve individuals will be audited to the 10,000. So set out in the report, we have our risks that we have identified throughout our planning work. So we have one significant risk this year, and that is management override. So that is extant in all entities and one that we cannot rebut. So we do work at all organisations in order to mitigate the risk of management override. We also have for consideration this year the impact of the fact that we have not certified the 24-25 accounts yet due to delays in the certification of the underlying subsidiary Newport Transport Limited, and as that's part of the group we cannot sign off the 24-25 group accounts yet. We then move on to other areas of focus. So this is where our audit planning has highlighted areas that we need to focus our audit work on this year. So we have a pensions valuation risk in there, and that's because the triennial valuation will come through into this year's figures, which feed into the accounts and the disclosures. With regards to the valuation of land and buildings, the SIPFA code has changed this year, which requires indexation in the intervening years between which there's a full revaluation of an asset. Due to those lower materialities within senior officer remuneration and related party disclosures, we've also raised those as an area of audit focus. You may recall from previous years that the South East Wales CJC is included within the accounts, so we just need to check that those checks and balances have been included properly within the accounts as well. We've also included an area of focus for grant income, given in recent years there have been a few audit amendments arising in that area. Long-term debtors, we need to ensure the developer loans are valued properly within the accounts. And then finally, as I mentioned earlier, there's a new subsidiary, Cymru, so how that has been recorded and included within the accounts as well. So those are our areas of audit focus for the financial audit of 25-26 accounts. I'll now hand over to Bethan, who's going to take us through the performance audit programme.
Thanks, Helen.
Thank you, Helen. Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everybody. So I'll talk you through the performance audit part of the audit plan, if I may. As usual, as set out in the Code of Audit Practice, the Auditor General must satisfy himself that the Council has made proper arrangements for securing economy, efficiency and effectiveness in the use of resources, otherwise known as value for money. And in order to do this, we undertake ongoing risk assessments throughout the year to determine what our performance audit work will look like for the following year. So if I can just draw you down to the planned performance audit work on page 19. You'll see that at the moment the outlined local pieces of work that we've decided to do in the local authority are a review on leisure services. We would like to do one on highways, which we might also do as part of a regional approach. So we might undertake this highways piece of work in a few other local authorities as well, not as a all Wales thematic, just as a regional approach to highways. And the last one we intend on doing is a follow-up to the counter-fraud report, which was published in August 2023. We aim to complete all of the performance audit work by June 2027, and I'm happy to take any questions or comments on any of that work, Chair.
Thank you, Helen. Thank you, Bethan, for that. Are there any questions? Don?
Yeah, I've got a question concerning our Newport bus, which, because that's, and I was just wondering, because there's been delays on that in previous year and again now again, as to what were the measures being taken so that we can avoid this problem going forward, or are there understandings going on as to how we get around this roadblock at the moment?
Chair, thank you. It's probably for us to sort of answer that one. So there is an annual liaison between us and Newport Transport Finance. Laura and sort of Ping here are active in that space. So we just make sure that deadlines are known and what is required. We are working with them on the current issues that are causing a delay to the 24/5. They should be resolved fairly soon. That is because actually the bus company will be required to report on their results to Companies House within the next 4 weeks or so. So we are getting close to a resolution of some sort there, which will then enable us to unlock our accounts. So we're kind of getting there. And then the Chief Accountant, Laura here, is also now working with them on where are you on the 25/6 situation, because, you know, because we need those. We've been given some assurances at the moment that we're going to get their draft accounts from them. We have a query on a couple of things around the detail that we need to do what we need to do to produce group accounts. But, you know, that is ongoing active work that we're doing with them. It doesn't guarantee that everything is going to work, Don, but we are absolutely doing our best to sort of work with them, make sure they know what we need and by when, etc. That happens every year, but we're very active at the moment just because of the delays that we've got. There's additional work carrying on at the moment. So rest assured that we're on it and we're doing our best.
It's reassuring to know that they've got to submit to Companies House in the next 6 weeks. That sounds quite interesting. If I can just ask one more question, please, Gareth, is on page 42 of our information pack, and you're going to ask me, Audit Wales are going to ask me what page that is on theirs. I think it's page 42. Page 16 on your report. It's got the planning, the January to February, and then it's got the February to April. We're in May now, so I was just wondering how's it going so far in terms of meeting those, what you've outlined there? Are we online? Are we on target? Running behind, or whatever?
Okay, so I'll take that one. So yes, our planning and interim work has gone really well this year, thanks to Harping, Laura and the team who've answered our many requests for working papers and audit queries and invoices, etc., to help our testing along. I think we're in a really good space to kick off with the audit following submission by the officers on the 30th of June.
Thanks, Helen.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Norma?
I just have one, but I wanted to follow up on John's, really, just that I understood what the problems were with Newport Transport Company. Presumably, they're not providing us with the information by required deadlines. Is that right, Marianne?
So they are working with their auditors to resolve the issue with the 24/5 and convincing their kind of auditors as to where things are out there. We are assisting in that. For 25/6, we need the information from them at a certain level of detail so that the Chief Accountant here can work her magic and prepare the group accounts. So, we just want to make sure that we get that level of detail that we need to sort of do that.
And I have one question for Helen, if I may. Helen, at the bottom of page 14 of your report, page 40 on ours, on long-term debtors is the heading. I just don't understand the statement. It says the carrying value of long-term debtors in the balance sheet in respect of developer loans requires impairment. And it didn't make any sense to me. I don't know. Could you explain that to me, please?
Yeah, so the carrying value of the loans is the value at which those long-term debtors are held within the accounts. So every year, as part of preparation of the accounts themselves, the officers are required to determine whether the value of the outstanding debt is still recoverable. If not, they will require what we refer to as an impairment. So it's kind of like a write-down. So that is what that sentence is referring to.
Fine, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Helen. Any other questions? Could I just get the clarity then on the 24-25 council accounts? They currently haven't been signed off at this current moment in time. We're currently awaiting, as you say, the financial statements from the bus company. Are we, as an authority, going forward on the basis that if they supply their accounts, we'll hopefully get an unqualified set of accounts? Or are we, as a council, accepting that their accounts aren't up to date and therefore we will go for a set of qualified accounts, given that the amount of work that Laura and the team have to do, that they are now closing this year's accounts and having to wait? Can we just get that clarity? Are we going to wait, or are we happy with Audit Wales to give us a qualified set of accounts?
Good question, Chair, and relevant, because it's something that we've been thinking about in the last 2 to 3 weeks. Please say something if I get this wrong now. So, as an organisation, we were content to go with a, not happy, content, accepting that we would need to go with a qualified set of accounts. However, that entails a lot of extra work at Audit Wales's end. And actually, by the time that they would have done that work, the bus company will be getting close to their reporting to Companies House. So the issue may have been resolved then anyway. So whilst that is always an option for us, and we are content to do that as a backstop, we are going to wait, because we'd have to wait 2 or 3 weeks for Audit Wales to sort of do their extra work if we went down that road. We will know if we can go and get a clean audit report in that same time frame. So it's worth us waiting until then. So we may still get to 3 weeks' time, and if we need to go back to a qualified set of accounts, we will. So the organisation is accepting of that as an option if it has to. But we will hang on to see if we can get this resolved in the next 2 to 3 weeks.
Okay, so how long are we prepared to hang on? Because there's a lot of if, buts or maybes here. There's no certainty, is there? And the reality is we've been in this position since you closed the accounts last year, and we're now nearly 12 months on, and they've not provided it. And I, you know, in some respects, I assume it'll have to go back to the council or wherever. No? So it just gives me some concern that this thing is dragging on, and, you know, your team, Myrian, are having to deal with accounts now this year as well. And so will Audit Wales, with all due respect. They'll have to deal with them as well. So they'll have 2 sets to have to. They'll either have to give us a qualified set where they're going to have, I assume, the same auditors or different auditors working on our 24, 25 accounts. And you'll have also now new auditors working on the 25, 26 accounts. Is that fair and reasonable?
We're all frustrated, absolutely. So, a couple of weeks ago, we were going for a qualified set of accounts, but because of the timescales that Audit Wales have to do to go through their extra processing and checking before they issue a qualified set of accounts, we decided that we would have one final wait. So by about the middle of June, 3rd week of June, when actually we will know if the bus company are filing accounts or in what state are those accounts in, we will have had to have come to a decision. That will be the final position. We will then go ahead with either a set of accounts that are going to work, or we'll revert to the backstop of qualified accounts.
So who will make that decision, and on what date?
So I will make that decision, and it'll be at the end of the 3rd week of June.
Thank you. Don.
I guess because Newport bus are mentioned in our accounts, and the chair has to sign the accounts, it almost comes with, you know, we're on the dock. Have we looked at the implications, or what are, you don't need to answer, what the implications of Cardiff bus not meeting Companies House deadline, not submitting, and the implications that are for Newport?
If they are not going to meet the submission deadline, we will then prepare the accounts on the basis that will be qualified for us. That issue with them reporting and auditors will be for them separately. We've got everything we need to produce a set of accounts that will be qualified, but it will draw a line. Yeah.
Thanks, Marion. And obviously we won't know about that until the 30th of July, but if you could let us know by an email, that would be extremely great. Let the committee know. Lovely. Any other questions? Any comments? No, so, sorry, Chair, that's a recommendation that we note the Audit Plan 2026. Someone prepared to move, please? Thank you, Norma. Can I have a seconder? Thank you, Bev. All in favour? Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the Annual Opinion 25-26, and this is from Amy. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, Committee. So, yeah, this is the Annual Internal Audit Opinion for 25-26. I'll take you through the key points of the report and then we can move to questions and your comments. So my SWOT report commences on page 63 of your agenda pack. The annual opinion for 25-26 is reasonable, and the report outlines a summary of the work completed by SWOP Internal Audit Services for 25-26. 46% of audits received a reasonable or a substantial assurance, whilst 21 received limited. I just wanted to draw committee's attention that that's a fairly notable change from last year, where 81% of audit work received reasonable or substantial assurance. Obviously, each audit is different, but I do think a key factor here in that sort of change in percentage is the more robust risk-based planning approach that we've been using this year. Planning discussions are really focused around corporate risks, corporate priorities to ensure our audit plan is risk-based and is adding value to the Council. So therefore, it's not necessarily surprising that audits in these higher risk areas have identified areas for improvement or where there are control weaknesses. Okay, so just drawing your attention to some sort of the higher priority audit. So one audit in 25-26 has been assessed as a high organisational risk with a limited assurance. That's housing, advice and prevention. The details of this report aren't included in my annual opinion report because the audit remains at draft stage as of today. The findings have been discussed with officers and the limited assurance and the high organisational risk assessments have not been challenged, but we are just finalising the wording and those agreed actions with officers. I'll bring that back to committee in July, so you'll have that detail then. The other limited assurances that have been given this year include appointeeship, which I reported to committee in July, procurement cards was reported in November, last year, sorry, 25, and overtime, which was also brought to committee in November 25. Medieval ship and bereavement services are in the agenda, in my report, and I will circle back to those a bit later on. They're the first audits to receive limited assurance under the SWOP way of reporting, so hence you having that one-page report included. The other piece of work that is, has got an indicative opinion of limited assurance is housing benefit and council tax reduction. Those findings are still being discussed with the client, so again, I'll bring that back to you in July. Right, okay, moving on then. So just a couple of sort of thematic areas we've picked up on, or, you know, things I just wanted the committee to consider from the work that we've done in 25-26. We've got a couple of limited assurance opinions around sort of areas that run corporately through the councils. You've got overtime and procurement cards, so they're sort of functions that are corporately happening across, you know, across all heads of service. And then we've also got, through the medieval ship and the bereavement services audit, some issues around project management and reporting against service plans. Although we did, I just wanted to raise it to committee that the project management audit that we did back in 24-25 did have a reasonable assurance. That was looking at the corporate processes. I also thought it was worth noting to committee that limited assurances and investigations have been carried out in areas that have received a high or medium assessment in the fraud risk assessment. So that was quite important. And then, so future work will focus on the, sorry, I will get there. High fraud risk areas will continue to have that proactive fraud work, so we're focusing on those. We're also going to continue working with the Council on the fraud risk assessment. As part of agreeing actions and closing off agreed actions, I've picked up a couple of themes through those. So we've got thematic findings around policies, procedures and guidance not being up to date perhaps not being centrally available, not being clear. We've got a theme around sort of gaps in governance, oversight and accountability, including sort of roles and responsibilities not being quite clear, and inconsistent documentation of challenge and decision-making processes. So things are happening, but they're not always being documented clearly enough. And then the last sort of theme around key performance indicators, data quality, and improvements needed in performance reporting. Okay, we did 3 follow-ups last year. So follow-ups are a Newport City Council process. As you know, we're not going to do those moving forward with a swap way of working. We're going to stick with the action tracking, but we did do 3 follow-ups last year as a sort of rollover from previous processes. Progress was shown across all 3 follow-ups, with a significant number of the actions deemed as complete. And what we did, auditors worked really closely with the service to enhance the actions that were sort of in progress or not complete, to reflect the work that had been done, but to really enhance those actions and agree new actions that would really sort of fulfil and embed those control frameworks. So it was trying to recognise the work that had been done and then sort of re-agree in actions that would really take that service forward. And obviously those new actions that were agreed are all subject to SWAP's action tracking processes. Audit coverage across corporate risks and priorities is improving. We haven't met the target that we set this year, but I am confident that with the rolling risk-based planning that it will continue to strengthen that coverage. Action tracking, we've got 65 actions currently open, with 32 of those overdue. I've highlighted in my report that 21 of those are the actions that were bulk uploaded from 24-25 and 18 relate to schools. The reason I picked up on the schools element is the schools audits are quite in-depth and they cover a number of areas. Schools tend to then receive a higher number of actions per audit report. So just to give that context that a lot of them are across the schools. And then I have got a little bit of an error to admit to in my report. Apologies. I've highlighted that 16 actions have got revised timescales. That's 13, sorry. When I came to write my final report, we'd closed another 3 off, so that is 13 at this point. They've got revised timescales, and I've given you details in the report of what audits they relate to and the reasoning and sort of explanation for those extended timescales. Counter-fraud reporting, I've gone lighter in this report because you're due to get an annual fraud report in July. That will have a lot more detail, but just to give you a quick summary, we're continuing on our NFI work and we'll be shortly working with the Council to prepare the data submissions for the next exercise. The fraud risk assessment work is ongoing and we're working with the Council to move that from a spreadsheet that we're managing to sort of embedding it into a live document and processes within the Council's risk management processes. We've completed some proactive fraud work and we've got more planned for next year, or this year, 26-27. We're working with the Council regarding fraud training, where we can offer an e-learning package. So we're currently in discussions as to what that looks like. And we've completed 2 investigations. Actions, whilst an investigation follows a slightly different format, what has happened as part of investigations is that actions have been agreed to address the control weaknesses. Those actions are subject to the normal action tracking processes. So you've almost got one outcome of the investigation might be sort of in the Council's internal HR processes, but we still agree those actions so that those control frameworks are actioned and improve. Moving on to performance then, so 100% of all the actions have been followed up by internal audit in a timely manner. And I've been liaising with the directors and the heads of service around how that looks going forward, and we're going to implement a very proactive approach. So it won't be a sort of, oh, your action is overdue, what's your update? It'll be a month in advance saying these actions are pending and making that a more proactive approach than a reactive approach. Of actions that are closed, 100% have been done so in a timely manner, and it's noted that SWAP's average partner data close actions was 233, and Newport was below that at 175, which I think is a really good indication that actions are closed in a timely manner. We discussed audit coverage. That's around 73% at the moment. And as I said earlier, I'm fully expecting that to increase year on year. And our feedback survey average score is 100%, although I do note that the current return rate is low. I have reached out to all heads of service and have had really good engagement. We're actually opening some of those questionnaires back up so that the feedback can be provided. So hopefully when I come back in July, you'll see a higher return rate there. And then finally, just to pick up on the two limited opinions, you've got medieval ship and bereavement services at the end of the report. So medieval ship had 2 priority 2 actions and 1 priority 3. These were around ensuring monitoring and reporting was appropriately documented and recorded, ensuring appropriate insurance arrangements were in place, and reducing the risk around a single point of knowledge. And then bereavement services had 2 priority 2 actions around ensuring project management processes were followed with the project documentation utilised to demonstrate regular updates against its objective, milestones and risks, ensuring that reporting of project progress is accurate and transparent, and improving the policy and sort of procedure framework. And that is all I had. That was quite a lot. Thank you, guys.
Thank you for that, Amy. It is a comprehensive report this time. Might I suggest that before we address the medieval ship and bereavement services, we deal, and I apologise for this, we deal with any issues of substance within the report itself, if there are any questions. Don?
There is a question coming, honestly. Okay. In reading this report, I could have got really depressed because it looks as though reading the report, the council is going on a downward trend. Your imaging with reasonable, now we're near the bottom. That doesn't look good either. There are so many ways that you could think, gosh, this is not a good ride, the direction of travel is all wrong. My question is, do you think your narrative is right? Because nowhere in the narrative I could read where you're talking in terms of we're now adopting a risk-based, and so we're going in the high areas, just what you said, where you would expect there to be limited. That didn't come across to me. It came across to me like the council aren't doing so good. They've actually taken a downward step. And so my question is, do you think your narrative is reflective?
Apologies if I've not included that sort of narrative in the report. I thought I'd had a sentence in there, Don, but I'm not going to question you, so I can reflect on that.
Oh, no, you can question me, honestly.
Going forward, I can make sure that is just really clear within my report.
Okay.
Thank you for that feedback.
No, it's finished. Yeah.
I think that's a really good question. For the committee, I suppose it's really important to say this. It is a different approach, and it is no good for us to have a series of substantial or reasonable opinions provided to us. We are literally directing swap at the things that we think we have the most challenge with and with the most risk within the organisation. And that's different to previous. We want to get better. That's the whole point of this. We want to identify the things that are an issue. Amy and I have had conversations about the themes coming out of this and actually what we can learn from it and how we can apply that to stuff that SWAP aren't even looking at, and about getting ahead of that curve. So it's a really good question. But just to say, to me, this doesn't show that we're getting worse. It just shows that we're actually being more on the front foot about trying to tackle those issues that all big, complex organisations have.
Are we, as a committee, able to feed back to SWAP that we don't like the colour system? And that, reasonable just covers such a huge area that you're either, it would be good if there was someone like from SWAP Audit's team or something who sits on their governance and audit could feed that back so that we've actually got a better reflection, because I don't think it's easy for us to actually govern when to show good governance and assurance when the reasonable thing is such big and covers everything. Last year we were so close to being outstanding. Now it looks like we're so close to being poor.
Can I just suggest then that when we have our discussion with Amy prior to the meeting that we can raise that issue? Can I secondly now declare an interest, seeing that Don has raised the point? I sit on SWAP's audit committee, and I have to say, and I did say it to Don, we questioned the little clock face when we discuss some of SWAP's audits, which some of us weren't very happy with, but there we are. But I think it is going to be addressed, and I think we can address that with you, because it's known exactly what it means. But if you could note my declaration of interest, Taylor, that I sit on SWAP's audit committee. I declare a personal interest, not declaring a prejudicial interest, because obviously I've got no control over the company itself. So, Amy.
Just to, I guess, give a bit of a backstory, we had a new chief exec, I wish I had the date to hand, fairly recently, I think it's just over a year, and we've appointed a director of professional practices who hasn't yet come in, and the visualisations, the assurance opinions, the priority ratings is all going to be rejuvenated, shall we say, reviewed, and I would be amazed if our partners and our committees were not asked what they like about a report, what they don't like, what they'd like to see. So I'll definitely feed that back.
Thank you for that. I was going to say that because they have appointed some new members of staff who to look at specifically. Well, they haven't appointed you, have they, Marion?
No. Oh. Just to say that the issue of the results being attributable to a more risk-focused approach is on page 4 of the SWAT reports. It is there. Very clearly says that we can expect that. And as Rhys is saying, I think that it's good that we're tackling those likely areas where you might find some issues. Yeah.
Norma.
Thank you, Chair. I think my concern reading this report, it goes back to my hobby horse really, is the themes that have arisen from these audits, and I refer to paragraph 14 of the report on page 57, I think it is on page 57, and they're clearly, again, managerial issues, policies, procedures and guidance not clear and not up to date, gaps in governance, oversight and accountability have been identified, including ambiguous role and responsibilities, which again is basic managerial stuff, as well as inconsistent documentation of challenge and decision-making processes, lack of clear performance indicators, which really concerns me, although that's not within the terms of reference of this committee, data quality issues and inadequate performance monitoring. Now, if you couple that with the fact that we've got a relatively high level of actions overdue, and a number with extended deadlines, it calls into question the seriousness with, that management has taken of these issues. And I would be looking for some assurance that management at all levels are making sure their policies, procedures and guides are up to date, because if they're not up to date, we're not going to be delivering the outcome that we want. And performance monitoring and management is absolutely fundamental. So I'll leave it there.
I think just to say that in the training earlier that committee received, we had a good chat around perhaps doing some reflecting on some of this thematic themes and maybe doing some cross-cutting work to really pick up on them. So the themes that I found here will be driven into planning to make sure that those things are happening. On top of that, we've talked about, sorry, my words, they'll come. Going to CMT meetings with action tracking and getting a little bit more involved with the officers so that the directors are able to say, okay, well, hang on, we've got this policy and procedure action in this area and this. So that, I guess it's like lessons learned, isn't it? So actually a directive can go out from Rhys, for example, to say, right, everybody have a look at your policies and procedures because that's something that audit are picking up on. So we've talked about how we sort of merge that now and take it forward so that we can give you that assurance, Norma.
Rhys, sorry, can Rhys come in? Oh. Norma, if you've got another.
Yeah, I recognise that, but it's an issue for management at all levels in the organisations. Primarily, I've forgotten what I was going to say now. I did have an important piece to say. Anyway, it's gone. It's gone. We'll come back to me.
Reece, do you want to pick up some of those issues?
Yeah, no, that's fine. As I said, the purpose of doing this and directing, working with SWAP around some of the higher risk areas is to identify those things. As far as policies and procedures are concerned, they are reviewed and updated on a regular basis, but an organisation that delivers 860 odd different services, we literally have thousands of policies and procedures, right? So, and a lot of this can be time independent when SWAP go in, and what weird things are on the cycle. So, but guarantee that is, part of the conversation we've talked about is, so the new dashboard that SWAP will now be able to provide is that will be coming to our directorate management teams on a monthly basis, and we'll go through those themes and those actions in the same way we go through other performance data and project data that we've got as well. So this will all be incorporated into that same process.
If I just come back and remember what my point was really, I was just reflecting on it and how this has all come about. And I wonder whether hybrid working has an impact really in terms of managerial control. That's a research question, really. I'm quite happy to answer that. We, as an organisation, we were the only local authority in Wales that took part in University of Southampton's Institute of Work Studies, I think it was at the time. It was an international piece of work. We were the only local authority in Wales to take part in that, to do an analysis and assessment of the differential between working in the office and at the time, working from home, because it was started during the course of the pandemic. And there's no correlation between, and internationally, there's no correlation between those things. I think, where you employ highly skilled, conscientious, effective members of staff, they are those things if they sat in an office or they work on a hybrid basis. So it doesn't really do those things. The big issues, Norma, for Newport, every local authority is in the same position as we are. You would not design an organisation that does the things a local authority does in the way it does it. It is an incredibly complex organisation. We deliver 860 different services. They are not equal. They go all the way from schools down to warden services, and everything in between those two things. So they're not equal, but the policies and procedures we apply equally across the piece. And a policy being wrong in a school is very different to a policy being wrong somewhere else in the organisation. So we do need to bear those things in mind. The biggest challenge is for Newport. We've got a really fast growing population, increasing demands across those core services, the lowest ratio of staff per head of population of any local authority in Wales by some margin, and we're trying to operate in that incredibly challenging and pressured environment. And we don't always get it right. But a lot of these themes, as we picked up in the conversation, we will address them. And the part of the reason for doing this is that we can pick those themes up, we can understand where they are, and we can have clear plans in place for addressing those things before they become problematic.
Thank you, Reece, for that. And I can just reassure Norma that in the previous session, which unfortunately Norma had to chair another meeting, a lot of these issues were discussed, and there's a lot of lessons being learned, Norma, in regards to that, which I'm sure we can have a discussion about again. The points you raise about those overdue actions, which are 91 days plus, I can assure you that Reece and the team are on the ball there now to deal with that and lots of the other issues that have been raised. Just a quickie from me. Sorry, John, my apologies. You've been waiting there patiently.
No problem, Chair, thank you. I'm actually hesitating on whether to ask my questions now, because to be fair, I think Reece and Amy between them have answered a lot of this, but I'm going to raise it anyway, just maybe so you can provide just maybe a bit more reassurance. Is when I looked at the definition of use of reasonable assurance and that sort of speedometer clock face type graphic used as well, it shows that we're very near the bottom level of the reasonable section almost dropping into limited. The definition says there's generally a sound system of governance, risk management and control in place. That's great. But some issues, non-compliance or scope for improvements were identified which may put at risk the achievement of objectives. Now, as a layperson and non-expert in this, that sounded quite worrying to me, especially when you couple it with the drop from 81% to 46% of the internal audits actually reaching that reasonable or substantial rating. And then when you read in, there's phrases used like gaps in governance, gaps in oversight and accountability. So I appreciate you've already addressed some of this, but those phrases and figures did concern me. So I just wondered whether maybe you could just dig a little deeper into that for me.
I think that's right to have those thoughts. And then I think perhaps one of the questions that was asked in committee is how you use my report to I suppose, to fulfil your role as a committee member in terms of internal audit. And I think that is, so making sure we've got the right things in the plan. So, for example, I raised a theme around project management. If there were then no projects in the plan, I would almost sort of expect some, okay, well, you've raised that as a theme, why aren't you doing any further work? So I suppose now it's making sure the actions are implemented and we've got some process to put in to sort of support that. I think there's going to be some internal audit attendance at DMTs, for example. And then, yeah, have we got audits in the right areas to give the committee assurance that those control frameworks are being improved? The other thing we can have a think about with themes, and we've just done one for the schools audits, although I appreciate that is a little bit niche. We did 7 schools last year. We've combined those findings into a themed report to share with the head of education with our sort of direction would be then to share that with every school, so that it's not just the 7 schools that have benefited from the audit. All schools can take that report and think, oh, okay, we don't do that, but we better get that in place. Now, whether we can do that as well with an audit on bereavement and an audit on children's services, I'm not sure, but we can have a think about that and how we share those lessons learned from that processes.
John?
Sorry, I thought Rhys was going to come back with something then. I mean, based on what you said, I know a lot of the audits, or some of the audits you said in the report, were aimed at sort of higher risk areas. So, with that in mind, and based on what you said as well, are you sort of anticipating some of these figures to go up significantly in the next year or so? But certainly by the next time this report comes to...
Do you mean, do I think we'll see more limited assurances?
I was thinking the other way around, to be honest, moving more towards reasonable and going up rather than coming down.
I would absolutely hope that we will see more reasonables because the Council's taking on board and the action tracking is fulfilling its role, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Thanks. Yeah, what I was going to say is probably more useful now Amy said that. So I think part of the benefit of doing this now is, Amy's talked about identifying themes, but it's for us to identify themes as well, as officers. And part of my expectation with this would be, before we are directing SWAP towards the higher risk areas, but part of my expectation is, before SWAP go in, I will want heads of service and service managers to be doing almost their own audit, because we know the sorts of things that are being picked up on a thematic basis already, because they've already been highlighted in this report. So my expectation would be that things will get better. They'll be less. At the moment, we were expected it to go to be a worsened position from last year, because of the change in approach. But we shouldn't be seeing that in the future. We should be seeing an improvement. I hope I don't eat my words this time next year.
Any other questions? No, just a quick one. Well, Audit Wales have now gone. But again, it's just making sure that the counter-fraud arrangements and the report you're bringing to us in July ties in. Yeah, July ties in with what Audit Wales, because they're going to do their inspections. So what we don't want is you duplicating a substantial amount of work there in reality.
So I think I had a look at some of the fraud actions from their original report when I first came in, and I think we reported to committee, challenging my memory now, some of them were complete, but I have just recently reached out to Paul to get another copy of those to add on, because we've done a lot of work on fraud in the last year, so add on what we've done on top of that so that we're ready for that piece of work.
Yeah, no, and I think as discussed, if those recommendations can be set out in your report and what has been done to date would certainly hopefully assist their audit wells as well as assisting us. So that's that. Any other questions? Any comments from anyone on certainly the general report before we come to the medieval ship and the bereavement services? No, just on your point, just a comment I'd make is, I think this work is, demonstrate how well does the council know itself, and it's not afraid to expose areas which are high risk. And actually, if a bad report comes out on it, so what? Let's deal with it, because lots of councils, in my view, hide lots of things under a bushel and are not prepared to be open and transparent. And I think the one thing I've learned in this council, for as long as I've been here, is become a lot more open and transparent and willing to have itself tested. So I think, the authority's got to be complimented for that, in my view. So, Amy?
Can I just second that? A couple of the recent pieces of work we've done, the officers are, totally on board with audit, totally engaging and actually taking on board our feedback in the audit. So controls are being changed whilst the audit is ongoing. And I think that's definitely a testament to the officers of Newport City Council.
Amy. Okay, if there's nothing else on there, shall we go to the limited assurance reports? Firstly, the medieval ship, which is on page 87. Questions? John? I don't know who's going to take the medieval ship. Is that you, Matt? Okay. Welcome, anyway. Welcome, both of you.
It's just a quick question, and probably a very obvious one from the report. It was just the comment about a lot of the knowledge, data, etc., being in the hands of one person, namely the curator. Try to get my words out properly. So the question, quite simply, really is: has that, or is that being addressed?
Thank you, Councillor. So yeah, that has been addressed. So we're engaging through the council's programme for apprentices, and we're looking to take on an apprentice to work across the museum, culture and heritage services, so supporting some of that knowledge transfer in the museum setting. At the transport bridge as well, there's another member of staff who's sort of getting on years and is a sole responsibility, sole repository of a lot of the knowledge we've got around the bridge. And a lot of the focus of our apprenticeship will be sort of gathering and retaining, digitising and all that sort of knowledge that sits in the minds of these very sort of dedicated and long-serving members of staff who are, to Strategic Director's point, sort of sole operatives who are looking after these assets on behalf of the council.
Yeah, if I can, just to clarify, I'm not criticising the people themselves, because the enthusiasm and the dedication they showed in those sorts of projects is immense. I mean, something that I could never do. So, hats off to them. But I've been involved in an organisation before where all the knowledge was in the hands of one person. When that person left, the place almost fell apart, had to be rebuilt from the foundation up, because nobody knew anything about what was going on, whether it be accounts or procedures or whatever. So that was my concern when I saw that statement. But, yeah, thanks.
Absolutely, so shared, and yeah, we take steps to address that. And obviously, as a team, we've grown slightly, culture and heritage service, so we're all a lot more aware. Certainly, I know a lot more about the ship than I did sort of 2 or 3 years ago. So, yeah.
Don?
With the medieval ship, I was hoping you're going to tell me it is now insured. And the second part of my question is on why was it not? What happened so it wasn't insured?
So thanks for the question. And the answer to the first bit is it's better to answer the second question. So why it isn't insured is no insurer would take the risk over what is essentially a pile of timbers. So there was no way of establishing a value for it, and at the time of its discovery and several points since, we engaged with insurers around putting insurance on that asset, that artefact, or the collection of artefacts that is the medieval ship. So for those who aren't aware, it's still in storage, still a number of timbers. No attempt has been possible to put it all back together into one artefact as such. So the situation remains that no insurer will be able to place a value on it and to be able to insure it. So the answer to the first question is unfortunately no, we're still not insured, but we have re-engaged with our insurance team to see if what the art of the possible is, because there has been some progress. Whilst there's still timbers in a warehouse, we've dried it out, we've established a lot more knowledge about where it came from and methods of construction ahead of the next steps. So that conversation with the insurance team is ongoing, but effectively the artefact is still in the same piecemeal condition it was when it was found, albeit we've taken steps to address the fact it's been in the river for hundreds of years.
Matt, is it likely to be insured, or do you think it's uninsurable? What feedback
I think it'd be
are
very
you
difficult
getting?
to establish a value for it. Obviously, if it was more assembled than it currently is, potentially, but I mean, it's not even clear how we can do that yet. We haven't been able to establish how the ship was built, the name of it, etc. And still, there's lots of unknowns around the ship. We have dated it and been able to establish the region in Spain it came from as part of that sort of 20-year period of finding it and investigating it. But I mean, that would be again finding an insurance company who'd be willing to take that risk. And again, as I said, put a value against what's a very unique artefact or collection of artefacts.
Don't dig any more, Matt. I think it almost sounds to me like someone should put it back in the mud and bury it.
No comment.
But surely you can't say that.
Norma?
It's just picking up on Councillor Renner's point, really, and it's a comment and advice more than anything, because one of my learnings was it was always so important that everyone in the team knew where we were at a particular point and where to go for particular papers. And I always worked on the principle, if I got knocked down by a bus tomorrow, staff would be able to pick up immediately. And I think it's about ensuring that there's really good communication in the team. It's fine, employing an apprentice, but it's actually communicating within the team so people are aware of where documents are, where issues are, where we are in relation to issues, so they could always pick up if someone fell ill or something worse happened to them, really. That's just a comment.
Are there any other questions? Don?
One last one. I suspected it was going to be uninsurable. My question is, how are we showing that in the accounts? And what asset value can you attribute to that? And, how is that shown? Is it an asset or is it a liability?
Come on, Laura.
You're testing me now. It would be under our heritage assets, but I'd have to actually go back and just double check our fixed asset register just to find out how much value is attributed to that.
Okay, I've just got a couple of... In regards to insurance, again, it says, and I can understand why it's not insured. Well, it could be insured because some insurance company will take your premium, but it'll be ginormous, I should imagine. Does council know it's not insured? And the council know that there's a risk that presumably if this ship's in a warehouse somewhere and someone sets fire to the warehouse, that the medieval ship is long gone and presumably will be some ashes? Because obviously that's the real risk here. It's in a warehouse, which I assume isn't manned or secured by a security guard. It's just locked up and it's just sat there doing what it does. And is the council aware of that? Because someone needs to make a decision, I assume, at some stage to say, well, thank you for telling us. Do we continue spending an enormous amount of money and time on this in the hope that it will be, from what I'm being told, it will be reassembled one day and it will be put on display? And again, you'll know better than I am sure that there's lots of those sort of, I don't know whether they're ancient, but medieval ships, a lot of places around the world. There's some in Sweden. I think the Mary Rose, isn't it, in Portsmouth, I assume, is insured, but at least it's only half of it. But it's that real risk about that ship. So whether the council's aware, And in regards to the curator point, and I hear what you say about having an apprentice or an assistant, etc. I'm just wondering whether thought has been given to digitise now or get the curator to actually put on a digital format what they know about the medieval ship, because at least then there is a permanent record which can be used, and then on a daily basis they can share it. Because again, my concern is in local government we have lots of spods or spocks or whatever you want to call them, and once they go, you know, the institutional knowledge that goes with them is phenomenal. But, you know, nowadays you can sort of put a lot of that in a digitised format. Whether any sort of thought's been given to that.
Again, I'll answer the latter question if I may, Chair, first. But yeah, as said, mentioned earlier, part of that, because there's a focus around digital skills in our apprenticeship programme as it's coming forward for this financial year, very much that task around digitising all the records and the knowledge that it is a lot of it's on paper in the curators' working space at the university. Some of it is already digitised because we don't undertake the research in isolation. We're a number of partners, heritage organisations, universities, that piecing together that mystery of where the ship came from, etc. So some of that was already digitised, but yeah, certainly a key focus of that apprentice coming to work with officers in the heritage service is to digitise that vast pool of knowledge that they've got and collected over a number of years. In terms of the council's knowledge of the current location of the ship, yeah, it's an asset. We go through strategic asset management group in terms of agreeing the facility that we're taking on, because it's a lease facility, and that's approved under that sort of process and fed through channels accordingly. It's a lease that we take on, working with colleagues in Custom. We bought Norse as it was, but Custom Cymru now, and we've entered into that lease agreement with the necessary assurances, a safe facility and it's appropriately managed and sufficient for the task at hand.
So the answer to the question is, does the council know that the ship is uninsurable? Is that yes or no?
Yeah, because it's never been insurable.
Right. Okay. So it is aware. Yeah. Thank you for that clarification. Shall we deal with the next one first before we do the recommendations on this one? Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that. We'll go to bereavement services now. Any questions on bereavement services? Oh, there we are. Someone's got an easy life there. Okay. I think what will come out of this is that obviously we haven't got the action plan which has been agreed by the heads of service in regards to this. We've just got a one-page report now, but in future we will be able to drill down on this in our new computerised system to see the action plan which sits behind this, but we haven't got it today. And obviously there are some key dates here by which people have said they will meet these recommendations and what will be done. What I'm going to suggest is, in regards to both of these, is that we have a report back in September from the team, basically outlining what you've said now in regards to the comments, setting out what has actually been done. So in regards to, if we look at the limited assurance on the medieval ship, you've got the key officers, including senior management, have confirmed there is appropriate monitoring reporting. However, it's not always documented sufficiently. So we as a committee, subject to the committee agreeing, is we just need to know what's been done. How's that being addressed? We're not here to test you or anything. We just need to make sure that the recommendation and the action which has been picked up by the auditors is being addressed. And once we get that assurance, then obviously we can deal with that going forward. And that will be in regards to all the two priority 2 and the one priority 3 area. The insurance is an easy question. It's not insured because no one will insure it. And again, you know, as long as council's been agreed with that, you need to say council's fully aware of that, then that deals with that. But you're exploring that as and when. And again, the issue about the institutional knowledge in one person, again, just setting out what you've done in regard to capturing that, that knowledge in the event that the curator, you know, isn't there any longer. So that's in regards to that. And in regards to bereavement services, again, there are, you know, some really structured sort of points that have been picked up there. So the actions in regards to you've taken to address those issues. Are you happy, Amy?
I was just going to suggest, so medieval ships actions are due in July, so that works quite well because I'll have tracked the actions at the same time, so that works out quite well. Bereavement services are slightly later in the year, so could we delay Joe coming back until I've done the action tracking?
And when you're doing yours?
I can't think when. I think Joe would need to come back in January.
27?
Yes.
When have we got a committee?
Are we meeting in January? Yeah. Just so you get that full sort of me tracking it, and then we can go like that then.
January 28th. Oh, January 28th. So if we have, you will go back in and have a look. If we have a full report, then in July, when did I say?
So September.
And then we'll have the next one in January. Are you happy with January?
Fab.
Yeah. Is that okay? So you're not under any pressure now for bereavement services, but the medieval ship, Amy will come back in. Obviously, she'll give you some help and assistance, and then we can just get a report. We'll need a report from yourself just saying this is what we've been done, these are the action points, this is what we've done, and hopefully then we can release you. Is that okay? Okay, someone happy with that? That we note the report in regards to the limited items of the medieval ship and bereavement services. We had a further report in September in regards to medieval ship, and a report on bereavement services in January 2027. So I'm prepared to move, please. Thank you. Seconded. Thank you. All in favour? Thank you. Thank you for coming along. I apologise for keeping you so long. And if you want to leave now, you can. But if you wish to stay and be stimulated by discussion, you stay. Okay, next item on the agenda is the planning approach paper, audit charter, item 10. Amy?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So we've got the planning approach paper and the internal audit charter. I will be quicker on this one, guys. So SWAT's planning approach paper outlines how the 26-27 rolling internal audit plan has been put together to date and how it will continue to be reviewed and updated throughout the year. I've discussed this already. We operate a risk-based planning approach, largely liaising with heads of service, but also meeting with directors and other key staff in the organisation, as well as input from yourselves as the Governance and Audit Committee. Just to draw your attention to some of the key areas in the plan, we've got some key financial controls, we've got some proactive fraud work, we've got some audit work off the back of the investigations, including the continuous assurance work around P-cards we've discussed, and some work around, some work in direct payments. Got some ICT audits in the plan, and then just a couple of audits to highlight that link to the corporate risk. So we've got some work around the transformation and the medium-term financial plan, civil contingencies phase 2, highways maintenance defect identification, and housing temporary accommodation value for money. Sorry, another one, climate change. So just picking up on those couple of audits that are hitting those corporate risks. And then again, just picking up on something I said earlier, we've got a number of projects in the plan just to sort of test on the ground that those corporate project management processes are taking place. It's just important for the committee to note that the plan remains under constant review, and these quarterly meetings with heads of service are set up to revisit the plan, make sure the audits in the plan are the right audits at the right time. The internal audit function adheres to the mandatory elements of the Institute of Internal Auditors International Professional Practices Framework. So in the UK public sector, this includes both the global internal audit standards and other applicable guidance, which includes the application note for UK public sector internal audit. Going forward, I'm just going to refer to that as the standards. that's what we're sort of working to, our set of standards. SWAP is on a journey of continuous improvement to make sure we meet the new standards, and any impact on audit work or processes I will report to senior management and committee as we go. I am actually hoping to plan a training session this year for governance and audit committee members around those new standards and what the sort of big differences are from the previous set of standards. The chief exec's going to provide that training for me, so he'll come along and do that for us. The Internal Audit Charter is required by the standards and is defined as a formal document that includes the internal audit functions mandate, organisational position, reporting relationships, scope of work, type of services and other specifications. There's only one minor amendment to that document from last year, and that's in relation to the qualification that the individual who carries out SWAP's external quality assessment requires. So that has changed in the standards, so I've just reflected that in the Charter. I don't intend to bring that Charter back annually. I think unless there is a change to something, I would suggest that we do it sort of every 2 or 3 years, because it's just inefficient for me to bring it every year. Something new from last year, so the standards require auditors develop and implement an internal audit strategy, and in the report you've got a link to SWAP's business plan. And then on a page 103 of the agenda pack, we've just tried to, well, we've shown you a link to SWAP's business plan and how that links to the Council's priorities. And then lastly, pages 104 to 106 of your agenda pack have got the rolling plan to date. So that's a list of the audits in the plan for 26, 27 and beyond, but just noting that each progress report, I will include a copy of that plan so you can see it develop and change. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Amy. Any questions? Norma?
On the internal audit rolling plan, originally I didn't have any comment, but when I was reading the risk register paper, I did wonder why, bear in mind it's a risk-based approach, why Newport Council's property estate was not included, because that's down as a pretty high risk, and it's shown on the heat map as a high risk, and it's an area that I think we're all conscious of that probably needs quite regular looking at.
So I can confirm I've had a discussion with Tracy McKim, Head of Service, around this, so it has formed part of the planning meeting discussions. Obviously with the Cymru, have I said that right? Thank you. With that change coming on board, Tracy asked me to set up a further meeting with herself, Rhys, someone else. So those planning discussions are underway. So, Norma, I would think there will be something in the plan around that, unless there are other assurances the Council can draw upon. But, yeah, absolutely has been discussed, definitely being considered.
Okay. Any other questions? Any comments? Don?
Yeah, I just wanted to, we're on page 98, where you've got, where none of your paragraphs are numbered. How am I supposed to cope, Amy? Where you've got, rather than presenting the second paragraph with an annual plan at the start of the year, it can be subject to a high degree of uncertainty. We will continue to embed our continuous risk assessment and rolling plan approach. I just wanted to say, I think that's absolutely brilliant to do that, and also in hearing the way the Council have embraced that as well. I just think it bodes really, really well. So really pleased to hear that. And also from our point of view, I think the OPTRO, is that what do you call it?
OPTRO, yeah.
Okay, OPTRO, I think it's a really good tool for us in being able to monitor it. So I think these are all really quite encouraging developments.
Thank you, Don. Any other questions? Any comments? No? Can I, in regards to the recommendations, can I just make a slight amendment to it? Because picking up Norma's point and the discussion we had earlier as well, that the sort of rolling programme should be organic, and if any issues come to light in year, they could be put in wherever in discussion. And given that the discussion was that the rolling programme is being approved, or supposed to be approved tonight, that we were going to have a discussion with the committee in regards to the rolling programme at another session, is that the first recommendation is that the planning approach and rolling internal audit plan 26-27 be approved in principle, subject to ongoing discussions with the Council's Governance and Audit Committee. Would you be happy with that, Amy? Because again, we can have that discussion and picking up the points then, that hopefully would pick up that point. We are going to have a session about the rolling programme, Norma, before one of our committees. I agree that the internal charter, be approved, but again, I think you just need some delegated authority to make changes to it, because if something comes out from CIPFA or globally that affects this charter, I would hope that you can amend it fairly quickly, and then as and when necessary bring it back to us. So if they're fundamental changes to the charter, you've got power to do it there and then, rather than come to us and say, oh, I've got, you know, this has happened, do you want me to amend it? You amend the charter and just bring it to us. I don't know whether the committee would be happy with that, just to give you that power to amend the charter, because it makes life easier for you and for us. So if people are happy with that. Okay, so those are the recommendations, that the plan approach of the rolling internal plan 26-27 be approved in principle, subject to ongoing discussions with the Council's Governance and Audit Committee, the internal audit charter be approved, and 3 delegated power be given to the Chief Internal Auditor to make such amendments to the charter as and when required. Someone prepared to move, please? Thank you, Don. Seconded. Thank you, Bev. All in favour? Thank you very much. Next one is the Corporate Risk Register, update end of year report. Paul?
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, committee. So this is the end of year report. This particular report combines the quarter 3 and quarter 4 update, because obviously committee was cancelled back in March. So what we've done is combine both quarter 3 and quarter 4 to provide the end of year position in terms of our corporate risk register for 25-26, and then to also just to provide a little bit of forward looking and just to reflect in terms of some of the conversations that have happened earlier this evening. So just to advise to the committee, you'll note in the report, and as per at the end of every financial year which we come to this report, service areas are currently in the process of reviewing their risk registers as part of their annual service planning review, and therefore, you know, the risks in the corporate risk register as well as within their own service areas will be updated and will be reported back to committee in quarter 1's update. In addition to that, we're doing a lot more closer working with Amy and the internal audit team as well as service areas, just to make sure that the assurance that's provided around the corporate risk is fed back into us, and we can then support the service areas to update or improve in terms of the actions that are being monitored to try and mitigate some of these risks as well. And then in addition to that, the service areas will also be looking at their own risks and then reporting back to us in terms of any new and emerging risks that need to be included on their service risk registers and corporate risk register for 26-27. So in terms of the end of year position, the Council had 13 risks recorded on the corporate risk register. At the end of quarter 4, there was 1 risk which had decreased, and that was the adult services pressure. So that has reduced, and that's the commentary provided by the head of service has been included in the report. In terms of quarter 3, there was no changes to the corporate risk register. And then in addition to that, we've just included a summary in terms of some of the overview in terms of the service risks as well. So I'm happy to take any questions from the committee at this point.
Thank you, Paul. Any questions? Norma?
Paul, under housing and homelessness, I'm not sure whether this is a mistake, but there's a bit in one of your boxes on other arrangements, and under that there's a reference to Welsh Government grants received in 2022-23, and I just wondered, does this mean that no grants have been received since, or is the figure, the year, the wrong year?
Yeah, so this comes back to some of the review which we're doing with the service area. So this was something which we picked up, and we've asked the service area to review their control framework to update it, because, as you noted, it is out of date, and we have raised that back with the head of service to update that. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. I'm not sure whether you would be able to answer this, really. I was looking at the children's services, mitigating actions, and I realised we got huge costs, in terms of care of, children in need of care, etc., residential and foster care. And I realise we're doing stuff under the Eliminate Profit programme, which is good, and obviously it takes some time before that materialises. I just wondered whether we were doing enough preventative work to avoid residential and foster care.
I'll try and answer that. Sorry, I was making my microphone go funny by putting my hand over it then. Well, as a local authority, we actually, as part of our restructure in 2021, we actually created an entire new service area which does prevention for that very, very issue. Actually, our numbers of children looked after hasn't increased, even though the population's increased. We've managed to do a really good job around that. However, the levels of complexity associated with that have massively increased, and I think that's the issue, Norma. So we've got a really good prevention and inclusion service. It operates across the city. It does that sort of pre-social services work, and it is about trying to tackle those issues early and prevent families getting into crisis and therefore children hitting that system. But it's probably just we're just holding water because treading water because of that, because of the increased complexity, the issues that young people are facing children and young people are facing these days, and the increased costs associated with that.
Do you not think there should be some reference to that sort of work in the mitigating actions?
We could feed that back to the service.
Yeah. Because that's what struck me reading it. Knowing what the costs are astronomical, aren't they? And I was thinking, well, what are we doing in terms of preventing? And we're obviously doing stuff, so it'd be good to record it.
Yeah, that's a fair point. Yeah.
Thanks, Norma. Any other questions? Don.
Paul, on page 135 of our pack, under the risk mitigation action plan, the top, we've got the target date was the 31st of March 2026. The estimated completion date was 2026. Yet there's a star indicating that it's not running late, and it's on time. That's not true.
No, so this is a little bit of a timing issue in terms of when the end of the year updates were provided. So in terms of the timing of the report versus the timing in which we're currently reviewing, because these actions are also included in our service plans, which also get reported to the performance scrutiny committees in July. So we're currently going through this review process in which we're identifying and picking up with the service areas where they've been reporting, say, for example, as you pointed out here, a green when clearly the completion date has not been achieved. So we're going back to them and saying, can you please review this? Because obviously it's not correct. Right. So factually, we are reviewing that with them to update it. And then when it gets reported to the Performance Scrutiny Committee, they will have the most up-to-date date on there. And then, as I said at the start, this is all part of this review process of the service plans and also the risk mitigation actions to make sure that we pick up any discrepancies such as that as well. So it is a little bit of a timing issue, but also to give assurance to the committee, we're going back to challenge those service areas to say, well, look, you've missed that. We need to either put in a new date in terms of when you expect to complete it by, or to, have further assurance in terms of what's happening around that work.
To prove I'm an absolute saddo, Paul, it also reoccurs on page 141 and 147. Okay, so I'm sure you're on the case.
Yeah, all of these we've gone back to the service areas to challenge them.
I'm glad Dom picked those up because I was going to pick them up as well, so I'm not sad. Can I just say, obviously this is the end of year report now for 25-26. For 26-27, I assume the corporate risks are going to be completely reviewed, are they? And has that exercise taken place corporately to say these are the right ones if they are to go forward 26-27, or are we likely to have any new risks put in and some dropped off?
Yeah, so just to answer that first. So as part of the service planning review, so all the service areas have to review their risks. And then once we've completed that review, that goes to the directors for each of all the service areas to review that as well. When the Q1 update comes back to the Governance and Audit Committee, just to reaffirm some of the process that happens before it comes here, Executive Board are always cited in terms of the Corporate Risk Register, and we always have discussion in terms of making sure that the risks are the correct corporate risks for the organisation and that they do reflect in terms of what our priorities and what the key risks are. So there is this process that we'll be going through, and we're currently going through that process at this moment in time. So by the time we get the Q1 update, which I think will be in September, we would have already gone through all of that process, and then you might see some new risks emerge on there, or it might say the same, but it's that assurance that we do take it to Exec Board for them to agree that that is the risk register for this year to start off with, and then we review it as we go through.
Yeah, thanks for that reassurance. I'm sure it would have happened or is happening now, so it may be that in September we may have a couple of new risks, or we may just have exactly the same lot that we've got now. So thanks for that. Any other questions? John?
Thanks, Chair. I think this is more of a comment than a question, to be honest, but anyway, I was looking at the adult services, and obviously it's great to see a decrease in pressure there. It mentions the additional posts and increased capacity causing that, which is great. But looking at the heat map, the risk register heat map, it does show sort of entirely predictable pressures on budgets for with the increasing demands for homelessness, children's services and highways. It mentions those. With all their risks, their sort of current risk scores being significantly higher than their target scores. That's what struck me when I was looking at that. And I know later on in the report there's detailed breakdowns of all the risks and actions and the progress for each service area. But I just wondered whether you've got any sort of general comments on those particular pressures, and have we got any short-term or mid-term forecasts of what direction of travel we think we're heading in with those?
So to start off with, so target risk score is always something which service areas should be aiming towards in terms of reducing the risk and to what we call is the acceptable risk level appetite for the organisation in terms of managing those risks. As Rhys alluded to earlier, there are some risks which we cannot avoid, and we have to take on those risks as well. We're always, and this is always something that again, just to reassure the committee, as Exec Board, and I'm sure Rhys will come in to give that further assurance, there's always challenges in terms of saying, are we doing enough in terms of mitigating those risks, and is there more that we can do? So that is a consistent challenge question that is put back to heads of service as part of that. And then the service plans in terms of their objectives and the work in which we're doing as part of the overall corporate plan, all of that is also as part of this risk management world to try and reduce and mitigate a lot of that pressure which those particular services are facing in terms of that. But there's always there is a level of inherent risk, as Rhys has alluded to, the demands being placed on local authorities across here in Newport and across Wales in those particular areas. We're having to kind of manage those within the resources and the budgets in which we have. So obviously this is a consistent challenge and assurance that Executive Board are really putting onto service areas to manage those, and I'll hand over to Rhys.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. I think most of these, do I see the direction of travel of those ones you specifically mentioned, they're changing dramatically? No. They are the result of significantly increasing pressures and budgets not keeping up with those pressures. So, even though our settlement over the last couple of years proportionally has been good, is still not really enough to keep up with that level of demand. So I don't see the direction of travel on those changing massively. You know, the challenge for us, as it is for other local authorities, is, you know, if you don't focus on some of these corporate risks and actually have plans in place to try and mitigate those as much as possible. And whilst they might seem to the committee, they don't seem to change that much. You know, most of those had fairly significant budget investments within budget setting this year. What we can't end up in this situation is kind of giving up the ghost and actually going, do you know, the only things we are going to actually fund are going to be schools and social services, because that's the direction of travel with the budget. So, you know, we're managing and holding across the organisation. And the reason for having this is for us all to understand these are all of the risks that we're dealing with, and we are trying to balance all of those within that budget that we're setting. So it's an ongoing challenge, and you know, it's not going to get significantly better. And you have the financial challenge because of those pressures, but you also have the legislative burden that we've got. You know, some of the housing legislation has pushed that risk even further. So, and that's Welsh Government legislation, but also UK Government decisions about early release from prison, etc. You know, that all creates additional pressure, and we have to kind of try and flex and balance that.
Yeah, thanks, Rhys, and you know, thank you both. I mean, when I asked the question, I used the phrase entirely predictable, and you know, I suspect that these risk scores would be echoed and mirrored right across the country. It's not something that's unique to Newport, but I'm glad you mentioned about social services and education, because obviously they are quite rightly the top priorities, but I raise those other service areas just to highlight the fact that they are important as well, and you know, you've addressed that. So
yeah, and just to say, the difference, you're right, they are pretty much the same across the place. The difference for Newport is our population growth. Yeah, because it is not decelerating, it's accelerating, if anything. So that is, you know, other local authorities are dealing with these societal pressures and these service pressures and these budget pressures, and we're dealing with all of those and with significant and sustained population growth.
Yeah. Thanks. Thank you, Chair.
Any other questions? Any comments? No? Okay, go to the report. The recommendation is that we note the contents of the report. Someone prepared to move, please? Thank you. Can I have a seconder? Thank you. All in favour? Thank you. Next item is the Treasury Management Outturn Report. Laura.
Thank you, Chair. Evening, Committee. So this is the usual Treasury Management Outturn Report that comes to Committee every year. The overall position shows that the net borrowing as at the 31st of March was 143.5 million. That's actually gone down from 156.2 million from March 25. So the total borrowing that the authority has at the end of March 26 was 170.6 million. That's an increase of 2.2 million from this time last year. However, this actually hides a lot of movements that happened within the financial year. We repaid £40 million worth of short-term debt that we took out at the end of 24-25 for a purely cash flow basis. But we then took out a further £40 million worth of long-term loan, plus an additional £5 million short-term loan, as well as then some SALEX funding, which is in relation to specific energy projects at a much lower interest rate. So actually the authority at the end of the financial year took out a further 50.2 million of borrowing. But as well as that, we obviously have a number of EIP loans, which means that within the financial year we pay off an amount of that in instalments alongside the principal. So I think, as we say in every report, the Council is a net long-term borrower with an increase in CFR. Our internal borrowing capacity is actually declining as reserves are being used as intended. And our future borrowing need is actually going to be increasing due to the aspirations of the capital programme and any refinancing that we'll have to do in terms of existing debt. So where this borrowing was then undertaken in advance of need throughout the year, so in some cases we were able to take out some loans when the rates dipped. We've been able to reinvest that, which is one of the reasons why our investment balances were much higher at March 26 than it was in March 25. There was a variance of about 13.8 million. There was some small costs to carry in relation to this, but this cost was actually marginal. So the current economic and geopolitical uncertainty that this does pose in terms of our future borrowing needs is likely to be more expensive, and that will affect our affordability. Rates are currently higher than we'd built in the 26-27 Treasury and Capital Strategy that we brought to committee in January, and we will have to take some work to understand what the impact of that is as the conflict in the Middle East makes the outlook for rates highly uncertain. So we will have to do some work to understand what the potential impact of that will be going forward. So at the moment, our Treasury advisors are very clear on their advice that we should only be borrowing short-term at the moment until rates actually stabilise, if we do need to undertake any borrowing within the next few months. So again, just to note that this report does state that we're currently compliant with all of our prudential indicators, but there was still some work to be done at the point of writing the report. That work has now been undertaken, and we have failed one PI. That PI is the proportion of financing cost to net revenue stream, and this is down to the fact that this PI is impacted by some technical adjustments that we have to do outside of the revenue account. So there is no revenue impact as a result of these. But one of the other reasons that we failed this PI is that in February, Cabinet took the decision then to actually do a £1.5 million voluntary MRP contribution there. So that has actually increased our actual financing costs as well. Otherwise, we are compliant with all of our prudential indicators and the Treasury Code requirements. But again, just to note that these figures are draft because we're still working on the 25-26 Statement of Accounts as well. So the committee has asked for any feedback because this report will then be going to Cabinet and finally Council. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Laura. Any questions? No. Difficult times at the moment with the interest rates and what's going on. I can understand the short-term loans and that. So, and you know, you've got quite a good capital programme coming forward. So, yeah, hopefully it doesn't become unaffordable. You know, if things continue. If there are no questions, any comments? No? Okay, go to the report. Then that we note the Treasury management activities during 25-26 and note that the matter will be referred to Cabinet or Council. Someone prepared to move, please? Thank you. Can I have a seconder? Thank you. All in favour? Thank you. Thank you, Laura. Item 13, the work programme.
Yeah, so this is just a note. We've completed the 2025-26 work programme, and I've included the 2026-27 that's been agreed by officers. Obviously, I've taken some notes from today, so we've got the recommendation on training, an update to be provided in November, the medieval ship, a report to come back in September, the bereavement services, a report to come in January, and then I noted the purchasing card transactions is also due to come back in a similar vein. I just want to check when the action plan would be completed, just so we can schedule it in. Maybe Amy can answer.
Can I come back to you on that one?
Yeah, if I drop you an email, then we'll get it. It'll be in the recommendation table, but we'll get it scheduled on the work programme.
Someone prepared to move and note that the work programme. Thank you.
Can I just pass a comment?
You can.
That July's looking pretty full.
Yeah.
And, you know, if people don't want to go home, that's fine. But, yeah, it's just looking full.
You can consult with officers and see, obviously, May and July are a bit hectic because of the March committee, everything being moved over. I have moved some stuff over, so I can reach out to officers and see whether anything else could be moved in September. And then I think we'd do a potential special meeting.
Well, possibly.
Yeah, so it's just to be...
Once Mario made his decision, 3rd week of June.
It's just alert committee that there might be a meeting scheduled short notice.
Yeah. Well, if there is a special meeting, obviously to deal with the accounts, then it may be worth just putting a couple of other items on so that it lessens the burden in other committees. So thanks, Taylor. So we note that report. Date the next meeting.
July 30th.
There we are. And can I say I now close the meeting? Thank you very much.